Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here. We are continuing our preview of SEC football games for week one of 2022. Today we get to South Carolina and Georgia State. That one is going to kick off 7:30 Eastern on Saturday, September the 3rd in Columbia, South Carolina. The Gamecocks about 13.5-point favorites. Over under in this one of 55.5 as we do this about 3 weeks out. A year ago, South Carolina had a really nice late run in the season with 7-6, won a bowl game despite not really having a quarterback and playing several guys. Georgia State, though, you might remember the name Sean Elliott, Blake. He was Carolina's interim a few years ago when Steve Spurrier stepped down midseason. The Panthers went 7-5, scared the pants off Auburn a year ago. 10 super seniors back, and a team that ranks in the low to mid-80s of the FBS forecasts that I'm seeing.
So you're calling the upsets, what you're saying?
I'm not calling an upset, but I have some points here that I think make this an interesting game. And my dog is, I don't know if he's agreeing or disagreeing, but he's got an opinion on this.
I say that because we previewed every other game in week one thus far, I think, minus Vanderbilt since they play in week 0. But most of the lines, we've looked at and we've been like, okay, well, these are pretty big lines, right? And we're trying to figure out, okay, do we take whoever, Tennessee minus the 31 or whatever it is? And, we're looking at those kind of things. But this one, this is not your usual, kind of line when you look at it that way. But it's because, like you said, it's, I think, knowing what Georgia State's capable of. And, and look, there are still some questions with South Carolina we have here in early August. We know that they've certainly got a quarterback coming in that there's a lot of high expectations for. And, this is a team that you would I think a lot of people feel like are going to take another step forward this season or have the opportunity to do that after a very impressive first season for Shane Beamer. And so, yes, this is not one of those games, like we said, where it's like you're starting off with a spread where you're a 5-touchdown favorite. This is one of the more interesting games, I think, just because of the skill for both teams here. And yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Okay, let's start when Carolina's got the ball. Spencer Rattler, maybe the most high-profile transfer in the country this time a year ago. Everyone was talking about him as the Heisman favorite. A month later or so, he doesn't have a job. He reunites with Beamer, who he had a relationship with. The whole offensive line for Carolina back, although it didn't run the ball that well. Kevin Harris was injured, which didn't help. He's in the NFL now. But there's some talented targets. Josh Vann, Jaheim Bell. Carolina's got some skill position players. Georgia State, on the other hand, 5 starters returning on that side of the ball, a couple of all-conference players. I think they gave up 27.1 points a game a year ago. Not an outstanding defensive unit, but, Georgia produces some athletes. That team is physical. Again, ran into a physical Auburn team a year ago, was not scared. So I think we've got intriguing matchups on both sides of the ball here.
Yeah, Rattler, obviously, like we mentioned, that he's got all the attention, and just wanting to see what he looks like in this offense is going to be, a lot of fun to kind of see how that unfolds. And like you said, there's some talented players to work with there for him in the passing game and those kind of things. And so I think that's something. I think that the line play to me is going to be very important, and maybe not just in this game, but I think in a lot of games this year for South Carolina, that's something that we will look at and see kind of what the offensive line looks like. I think we may say some of the same things about the defensive line right here in a second. So I think the line play this is one of those games, like we said, where you're not just going up against an opponent that you feel like you should beat by 5 touchdowns. So I think seeing how the offensive line matches up against Georgia State, and we'll say the same thing about the defensive line. I think those are the kind of things you look at, for South Carolina to meet its expectations and keep going forward. I think that's something. And look, like we've talked about too, and this is kind of just a general thought on things, but it's important that you kind of work some of these things out in this game offensively if there are still things to be worked out, which I think everyone's kind of a work in progress. Because remember, Chris, who's up next on the schedule?
Ooh,
Arkansas and Georgia. So we talked about how interesting that is to have 2 of your first 3 games against SEC competition, and really good SEC competition at that. So I think that's going to be when we look at this South Carolina offense, that's going to be something I think you really look at here and see how much can they sort of put together and get some momentum built heading into two very important games in conference play.
Okay, the other side is where I see problems potentially for Carolina. Georgia State is returning 7 starters from a year ago, although it has a new offensive coordinator. It's got a running quarterback in Darren Granger, who averaged almost 5 yards a carry, was really good with the ball, it didn't get picked a lot. Carolina just had fits stopping the run a year ago, and this is a team that averaged 5 yards a rush. Now, to boot, Georgia State returns 2 running backs who combined for almost 1,900 yards. It's a lot's been made about Carolina's pass defense. Cam Smith is terrific, one of the better corners in the country. But as people have said, people didn't really throw the ball on Carolina because they could run it so well. Man, all this experience that they've got with the team that's done it before, and again, is shown it's not scared to face SEC teams. That's where I'm really worried for South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? They had the best pass defense in the league last year. But the problem, right, is if teams are just running the ball all over you, that doesn't always have to even be a factor. So I think
Oh,
that's
and by the way, best defensive lineman gone to the NFL.
yeah. So I think that's it. Is you've got some talent coming in, and how does this defensive line look from a just stopping the run standpoint? I think that's going to be very important. And look, you mentioned this is also a team that they're going to be opposite that will run the ball. And I think that is certainly something that, like I said, the line of scrimmage, I think is if you're picking, what are the biggest things, if you're looking at it from a South Carolina standpoint, I think you're watching both lines of scrimmage here. You're watching the
Mm-hmm.
offensive line, you're watching the defensive line. I think those are the two things in a game like this leading into those two huge SEC games. I think this is so important to kind of see what that looks like in week one and really see how things have progressed on both sides, but especially like we said on the defensive line, given what they did against the run last year. I think that's it, and so that will be the name of the game here. And I think that like we said, this is not a Georgia State team that's going to lack possible scoring opportunities, just given kind of what we think they're capable of, perhaps on offense. So yeah, a lot of starters back for Georgia State on this side of the ball, and the running potential for them, and you can bet right away, right? Like if you're Georgia State and you're looking at this game on paper, what do I want to do? My strength is running the ball. What was
Run.
South Carolina's biggest weakness? Stopping the run. Like there's no predictions here that you're just going to have to go out and make a wild guess as to what Georgia State's going to try to do here. So whoever wins that battle will go a long way in determining who wins this game. So
Yeah, let's be clear. We are not professional bettors here. We're just guys who watch a lot of SEC football and study it. The implied final score of this one, based on the spread and the over-under, 34-21. With all of Georgia State's experience, again, 10 super seniors, team that gets athletes, a head coach who is going to be motivated. He was the interim, did not get the job. A team that can do things that Carolina had big issues with a year ago, figure to be big issues again. The way Georgia State played Auburn a year ago, I don't know. I'm not feeling great about Carolina and 13.5. And I think the over-under at 55.5, also one I wouldn't feel great taking the under on. I think there might be more points than that, given that neither team was great defensively and both can do some things offensively that could give the other side issues.
yeah, that you said we're not professional bettors, but if I had to pick one thing here, I'd go over 55,
Yeah.
55 and a half. I think that's probably your best option because, like you said, I think South Carolina wins this game. And I think the biggest question is how good are they offensively with Rattler under center? And if he's the game changer we all know he can be and has the potential to be, they're going to put up a lot of points, even against a team that, has some capable players on their defensive unit. So I think that's it. If I had to pick one thing here, I'm going to pick South Carolina win, but I think over 55.5 is probably the
Yeah.
best choice if you're looking at it from a betting standpoint. So,
Yeah, both of us agree. We are previewing all the SEC games for week one, and for that matter of fact, Vanderbilt's game in week 0. So be sure and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss them. We will see you again very soon.